Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at EX3, and EX3 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be a brand new iteration of the Cross Hearts deck. So Cross Hearts is one of the few decks that actually is going to be heavily impacted by the brand new ban and limitation announcement, with the limitation to Shoutmon Cross 4 and Sunrise Buster really nerfing the deck, but we still have enough tools from BT10 to try to make it as competitively viable as we possibly can still, while we're waiting for all of the good updates that are coming out in BT11 in order to revitalize the deck. So as far as what we have, the deck for the most part is going to remain mostly the same. We're just going to swap out a couple of parts and pieces. So as far as the deck goes, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Pickmon still as the main Digitama because, well, it's the only Digitama that we have that's actually worth running. This card also has the benefit of allowing us to draw some cards when we're attacking with our cross-hearted traded Digimon, so it's acting as a good draw engine as well. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Shoutmon. So this brand new iteration of Shoutmon from BT10 is still one of the best cards, not only acting as a digger for the deck to try to dig out our Tamers and our other cross-heart Digimon, but he also has the save ability, so when we're aggressing with him, he has the potential to put himself underneath one of our Tamers, and on top of that, the most important factor for the card is the fact that he gives our other Shoutmons rush, so that way we could try to be as aggressive with our King Shoutmon, Shoutmon Cross 4, and Shoutmon Cross 5 as we possibly can. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Starmons. So Starmons, like Shoutmon, has the save ability, so when he would get deleted, he gets to hide underneath our Tamer to use as material for Digicross later. And then on top of that, the inheritable ability we're looking to gain out of the card when we're aggressing with our higher stage Digimon is the fact that he allows us to also draw a card, so that way our deck can try to be as consistent as we possibly can. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Sparrowmon. So Sparrowmon not only is a good card to use just because we're already running Shout 5 and it's one of the material pieces for our Shout 5, but it's also one of the most aggressive rookies that we currently have in the deck, just because as long as we have another Cross Hearts Digimon or Tamer in play, during all turns it's going to gain plus 3000 DP, making it a rookie that is at 5000 DP, which is just pretty strong of a stat line for a rookie to be using, on top of the fact that, like all of the other level 3s, it also has the save ability, so if it does get deleted, it gets to hide itself underneath our Tamer to use for a material, and when we use it with our Shoutmon Cross 5, so that way we could set up a reboot blocker. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Shoutmon King version. So Shoutmon King version is just a pretty decent replacement card to Shout Cross 4 for the time being, just because his on-play ability actually lets us retrieve our Shout Cross 4 or our Shout Cross 5, or even other copies of our King Shoutmon. So that's already good, just being able to recycle and reuse some of our cards the best that we possibly can, on top of the fact that he's counted as a Shoutmon, and through his on-play ability while he's on the field, he's also going to be counting as other material for our Digicrosses, so that way we could try to shore up some of the deck's inconsistencies when it comes to finding the correct pieces to line up our Digicross. Then on top of that, he himself has the material save 1 ability, so whatever's underneath him is going to be able to be saved underneath our Tamer, and he does have the Digicross ability himself, so that way when we card play him, he's going to reduce his play cost by 2 for using any of our other Cross Hearts, making it super easy to be able to have access at a Digicross. The best card that we want to use to Digicross with him is going to obviously be our Shoutmon, so that way when we go into our King Shoutmon with that stack, then he's going to have access at the rush ability, and that's just pretty decent, having good levels of aggression. And then his inheritable ability for our Shout 4 or 5 to use is going to be a just generic DP boost to try to make those Digimon as powerful as we can possibly make them. Next, I'm going to be running one copy of Shoutmon X4. So Shoutmon X4 did get limited to one, so we could only run one copy, but the one copy we're still allowed to run is super valuable and important for the deck on its overall aggression. So not only does it just reduce its play cost by all of the different Digicrosses, so ideally with all of the Digicrosses line up, he's going to only cost us one to hard play, and that's really good because he has the on-play ability to draw us 2 cards, and he's going to have all of the abilities of all of the different inheritables that are going to be underneath him. So that's just a lot that this card can do. And on top of that, the craziest part of this card is the fact that he has an end of attack ability where we get to basically delete this Digimon and shove all of his sources underneath a tamer and unsuspend that tamer to then be able to line up another Digicross play. So unfortunately we can't necessarily loop him, but we could still utilize him as a very good aggressive tool nonetheless. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Dorulumon. So Dorulumon is a really good card just because of all of the synergy the deck has with him. We have a tamer that could help play him for free. He has a nice on-play ability to reduce one of the opponent's Digimon's DP, and on top of that, he has the on-delete ability of save, so we could be aggressive with this card as well, while we're just trying to line up our Digicrosses. And his inheritable ability for when we use him as a Digicross is the fact that he's going to be debuffing the opponent's security, making it easier for our Digimon to live through those aggressive plays. And for some very similar reasons, I'm also going to be running 4 copies of Ballistamon. So Ballistamon does have a tamer to help play this card, and the fact that he again has the on-delete ability of save to hide underneath the tamer to then be replayed with our tamer or just Digicross is really good, and the benefit for using him with our Digicross is the fact that he's going to be giving our Shoutmon piercing. And then as far as the big boss monster of the deck, it's going to be 4 copies of Shoutcross 5. So Shoutcross 5 isn't as good as Shoutmon X4, but he still has a pretty decent amount of usability just because he's a very aggressively defensive card. He's already going to have the blocker abilities, then he natively also has Security Attack Plus, so he's just going to be swinging it into the opponent's security and dealing some good consistent damage with the Material Save 3 ability. So at worst, we get to save 3 of our materials underneath our tamers when he does get deleted, with a Digicross ability of 2 with 5 potential materials. So with all 5 materials, we could reduce him down to 0, but at worst, we could still just try to Digivolve him on top of our King Shout, or we could just try to hard play him for a slightly reduced count with the Digicross materials that we do have access to. And then the last Digimon of the deck is going to be 2 copies of DeathX. So DeathX is still just that good of a card to try to counteract against swarm-based decks. So the fact that for each of the opponent's Digimon and Tamers, he's going to be reducing his play cost, and the fact that we don't actually have to Digivolve up into him to gain some benefit off of this card makes him absolutely insane for virtually any deck to use. This deck is no different. So his on-play ability we're trying to gain is de-Digivolving 1 on all of the opponent's Digimon, and deleting any of their Digimon that are level 4 or lower, acting as some good low-level control, with an end of opponent's turn ability to act as some good recursive removal to try to keep their field as clear as we can possibly make it. And then as far as the tamers go, I'm still going to be running 4 copies of Taiki. So Taiki is just our Digicross enabler on top of a good consistency tool, looking for our Cross Hearts cards, putting one of them into our hand and one of them underneath our tamer to easily line up our Digicrosses. Next, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Tai and Kari. So Tai and Kari is still a pretty decent tamer, even though we lost a lot of access to Sunrise Buster to make it even better. It's still just a good card to help us gain some passive memory generation for being extra aggressive. Then on top of that, the fact that it's still going to help debuff the opponent's security is still valuable just because it helps us make more aggressive lines of play and tries to help keep our Digimon around as long as we possibly can. Next, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Kiriha. So Kiriha is going to be the deck's stereotypical memory fixer, but because we do have less Digicrosses that we're going to try to enable, we don't need as many Digicross enablers, and that's the only real intended use for this card outside of that memory fixer, is the fact that it's just extra copies of Taiki to enable our Digicrosses. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Akari. So Akari is still a really good card just because we're already wanting to run Dorulumon, and the fact that her on-play ability plays a Dorulumon, not only just from our hand, but from under our tamers as well, make it so that we could reuse the card over and over again. Then when we do play the Dorulumon off of her ability, or even just hard playing any other Cross Hearts card, triggers her secondary ability, allowing us to draw a card by suspending this tamer, so she's just a good draw engine to help with the overall consistency, on top of lining up with our Dorulumons. And for a very similar style of reason, I'm also going to be running 4 copies of Zenjiro. So Zenjiro is doing the exact same thing as Akari, except instead of drawing a card, he's gaining us a memory, and instead of playing Dorulumon, he's playing Ballistamon. Next, on to the options, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Crimson Blaze. So Crimson Blaze is just a really easy option for us to run, just because, again, it tries to counteract go-wide strategies. So for each of the opponent's Digimon in play, it reduces its cost to use this card by 1. So if the opponent has just a wide field, then this card just becomes super easy to play to be able to delete all of the opponent's Digimon with 6000 DP or less, and this is really important to be able to get rid of the opponent's floodgates, so that allows us to be able to have easy access at our Digicrosses again. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Fireball. So Fireball is a really decent option, not only to help us draw cards, but to get rid of the opponent's low-level Digimon, namely their rookie floodgates, in order for us to play our cards as effectively as we possibly can. And then the last card and last option of the deck is going to be the 1 copy of Sunrise Buster we are now limited to run. So Sunrise Buster is still just really powerful for this deck, just because it not only helps set up our tamers, but allows us to try to delete the opponent's Digimon all in 1 card. So the wider the field of tamers that we have that are red and yellow, the more we'll be able to DP reduce the opponent's Digimon, and at worst still just being able to set up our tamers, just to help trigger their on-play abilities to help make the deck even more consistent. But as far as the core strategy to how the deck wants to play, you're essentially just going to try to use whatever low-end material-based Digimon that we have in order to be as aggressive with as we possibly can. Maybe all except for Ballistamon because he's a blocker, but regardless, the fact that they all have the save ability just allows all of them to be tucked underneath our tamer, and we have some really good tamers to try to gain as much value as we possibly can. So we're trying to be aggressive with our low ends to then help set up our high end, which is going to be our Digicross cards. So even though Shout 4 did get limited, we still have King Shout to be able to retrieve him and be a cheap card to use for another way to have access at Digicrossing. Then on top of that, we are going to shift the deck to be a little bit more Shout 5 focused, so that way we could try to gain the most out of our Shout 5s, and we don't necessarily care if we don't get full value out of our Shout 5s, just because we could still get a lot of value off of what we can have based on what our setup is. And then as far as some other unique and interesting things that we could do with King Shoutmon is the fact that now we have access to some Digivolution to be able to Digivolve into our Shout 5, so we're not necessarily needing to be able to just hardcore Digicross. We could set up whatever inheritable we want with our Shoutmon, just because we could use any of them as material to then Digivolve into a Shout 5 in case we're getting blocked on our Digicrosses to still have access to our higher stage Digimon. And then on top of that, we do just have some other tech and tools that we could think about incorporating into the deck, all depending on what you actually want to try to gain out of the deck. So we do have the ability to shift the deck to be more Rookie Rush focused, and we do have other Cross Hearts Digimon that we could play to try to be as aggressive with them as we possibly can. So we do have Dondokomon as an example of this. Even though he doesn't have the save ability, he's just a very aggressive level 3 Digimon for us to think about utilizing. Then if we do want to try to dig out our Shoutmons more specifically, we could think about utilizing the BT5 Shoutmon. Even though we're not looking for Blitz cards, he still helps with the overall consistency of the deck while also still being a Shoutmon. Then we do have a plethora of different options that we could think about running. So we do have defensive plugin C as a really interesting tech piece to think about utilizing, just because it adds protection to our Digimon on top of giving them blocker and reboot if they don't already have it, and the security ability could help play Digimon off the top of our deck to try to enable some of our other plays. But while we're on the topic of plugins, we also do have high-speed plugin D to be able to give our Digimon jamming and unblockable, which is super relevant when we're trying to be able to aggress onto the opponent. Then there's a whole bunch of different high-end removal that the deck has access to just because of the slew and plethora of different colors the deck is already playing with. So we could run Grandest Soul because, well, Zenjiro is green. We could run Lonke Ariscado or Wyvern's Breath because we're already in yellow. Then we do have Gaia Force because, well, we're already in red, all as really good high-end removal cards. Then on top of that, we do have some other utility cards that we could lean into, like Hero of the Skies, just because we could give our Digimon Security Tech Plus, or like a Fireball, just use it as a good generic draw too. Then we do have just a whole bunch of various other removal tech that we could think about incorporating, all depending on what you value wanting to utilize. Then we also have ways to be able to gain some instant tempo to try to make more powerful plays possible in the form of Blinding Ray and Gravity Crush. And then we do have various other colored tamers that we could try to take advantage of depending on what you're actually trying to gain out of the deck. So the starter deck Matt Ishida is actually one of the cuter tech cards just because we're already trying to be aggressive with our Digimon during our turns, and when our Digimon gets deleted, then they'll go underneath our tamer, and that allows us to use our mat to be able to gain some tempo for the fact that our Digimon are deleting themselves, and it also opens up to the color opportunities that purple has in terms of the options that we could possibly think about. And then there is just a whole bunch of different tamers that we could think about utilizing, all depending on the types of cards you're going to be running to support it. So you could still think about running Tai just to give our Shoutmon Cross 5 even more security tech. Or we could shift to using Sora and Matt to gain some extra blue sources, so that way we could then think about utilizing blue options. But that just goes to show there's a lot of different possibilities that you could still use with the limited tools that we currently have available. And even though the deck did get nerfed, it's still somewhat playable. It's just not going to be as competitively viable as it once was or what we were expecting. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.